Let's face it, at some time in our lives, we will come across people that we cannot get along with. How do we deal with such individuals? Do we fight or flee? Well, the Quran gives us a third path and shows us that we can actually change others by changing ourselves. Today, we review the topic of conflict resolution, ironing out our differences in a unique fashion. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome back to Ramadan Reflections for today, the 29th day of this blessed month of Ramadan. Today may very well be the last day of fasting for some. Others may be blessed to have a 30th day to have a full 30-day fast of Ramadan. But whatever the case may be, we all follow our obligations to God. We ensure that we follow the rulings that we are required to follow. And we follow whatever it is that we need to do, whether there be a fast of 29 days of the month of Ramadan or 30 days. Ultimately, it's all about submission to God. It's all about worshiping God how He wants us to worship Him. And for some believers, that may be 29 days, and that's not a problem to fast. For others, it will be 30 days, and that's not a problem for them. We should never let these minor differences let there to be major differences, whether it be within a family, or within a community, and especially online. One of the greatest challenges that people have, and one of the greatest fights that happens, is the moon wars, as they call it. Forget about Star Wars. We have moon wars in our community. Was the moon seen? Was it not seen? How many people witnessed it? Was it 2? Was it 3? Was it 4? Did they have binoculars? Did they have a telescope? Who are they? All of these details, unfortunately, people, maybe some misuse them for their own personal agendas to push their own agenda forward. Unfortunately, it's become an issue within our communities, and obviously, unfortunately, and maybe only until the time of the 12th Imam's return will these problems be resolved. But today, in this topic of the 29th day of Ramadan, where we're looking at conflict resolution, and maybe this is a part of the solution, is to resolve how to resolve the conflicts, is how do we iron out the differences? In psychology, they have a term which is fight or flight. And this term is basically been coined, and it's a response in dealing with events which the mind perceives as stressful or frightening. It's a condition, we're told, which activates a sympathetic nervous system and triggers an acute stress response to get the body to either fight or flight. Either stay and defend your position and maybe a physical altercation, or you leave. You can't deal with the stress and the pressure, so you leave, you get away from it. Conflict resolution obviously is something which has been needed since day one. Since the first humans stepped foot on this earth, there has been a need for conflict resolution. You look at the story of the Quran of Adam and Eve, peace be upon both of them, and their two sons, Cain and Abel, Habil and Qabil, as we know them in the Arabic. They're both told to give a sacrifice. One's was accepted, one's was rejected. What does the brother say? Qabil says to his brother Habil, he didn't take it lightly. He's, I'm gonna kill you. That was the response. I am going to kill you. But what does his brother say? He says that if you raise your hand to strike and kill me, I am not going to do the same. I'm not going to stoop to your level. You can kill me, but I have a fear of God. I have a fear of God. Inni akhafullah. I recognize God, and I know that what He would want is not for us to be in a physical altercation. We have a conflict, two brothers. Let's resolve it as men. Let's resolve it as human beings. And unfortunately, from that day forward, we see that conflict resolution is a necessity of every era, of every. Again, it's not a discrimination. Everybody can face conflict in their life. Genders doesn't matter. Race doesn't make a difference. Religion doesn't even play into it. Right? And so conflict resolution, which is a way for two or more parties to find a peaceful solution to a disagreement among them, is something desperately needed in the world today. Disagreements happen to people for many reasons. Maybe personal problems, personal grudges. It could be financial issues. It could be political. It could be emotional. Now, when a dispute arises, often the best course of action is to negotiate and resolve the disagreement, which unfortunately is, although that's the ideal solution, that's not always what plays out in the world, is that people tend to aggravate the situation. Not only the example of Cain and Abel, but you look at even in times where two countries are at war with one another, and rather than ironing out the differences, one country, a third party, will continue to sell armaments to the one of the countries and provide them with intel and support to egg on the war, to continue to perpetuate that war, that conflict, rather than trying to bring them to the table to reconciliation. So conflicts do happen. We see them happening within business partners when it comes to money. Conflicts can happen at work with employees. It can happen at various levels. And one may argue that living in society as human beings, living together with our own mindset, our own way of thinking, our own goals and hopes and desires, that there are bound to be misunderstandings, which rise to that level of requiring a third party to step in, even in marriages. Right? That's why we have a concept in Islam of having people from both sides, of the husband's side and the wife's side of the family, come and discuss and mediate and discuss rather than going to divorce. So there are many ways that we can try and patch our differences. And ironically, in the chapter of the Quran, which is known as the chapter of Islamic ethics, Surah Al-Hujurat, chapter 49 of the Quran, which speaks about the morality of the Muslims, about not backbiting, not spying, not calling one another with bad names. One of the topics that God speaks about in that chapter is about Muslims being in conflict with one another and how they should be dealing with one another. Do you involve the United Nations? Do you involve so-called third-party impartial mediators and brokers that are always lopsided in agreements? The Quran presents us, brothers and sisters, that solution, as we've been showing in this entire series, that the Quran contains solutions for our problems. But unfortunately, we want to go to the secular system. We want to go to the court system for divorce and for business problems and for all of these issues, rather than going to the Quran. And so the Quran shows us that when it comes to dealing with problems, dealing with challenges in life, we see that the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah bless him and his family, that he gave us various approaches and methods to use. And it's a miracle, given the harsh, aggressive, violent, and often extreme reactions of those Jahili Arabs of the era of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which they would overreact to the smallest mistake of another person, to the point where they would launch a war which would last for years or even generations. The Prophet brought some revolutionary teachings to bring about reconciliation, to bring about, a sense of peace in society. He used diplomacy, even with non-believers. He brought about a concept of sulh, of reconciliation. And again, these are all based on the Quran, but the teachings of the Prophet, how he embodied them. He brought about peace treaties, as he signed with the polytheists of the Quraysh. He brought about the concept of mediation between husband and wife. He brought about arbitration. And he brought about the fact that when need be, coercion has to be used. But at the same time, the Prophet also taught us, and Islam taught us, the Quran taught us, give people benefit of the doubt. Don't assume bad about everybody. Be patient and forbearing. Have sabr, istiqamah. Have forgiveness with other people when they make mistakes. Have a concept of brotherhood, sisterhood, fraternity. Avoidance. Withdraw yourself from the situation until things calm down. These are 10 examples of what Islam and the Prophet gave us. And the one response which I want to share with you from the Quran directly today as I conclude is fight fire with water. You know, we tend to hear fight fire with fire. Have you ever seen a fireman when there's a bush fire or a forest is on fire, taking thousands of hectares of land that they'll take fire and burn the fire with more fire? Now, they will do that in controlled burns for certain reasons, but generally a firefighter, when your house is on fire, he won't come and put more fire in the house. He'll add water and chemicals and retardants to put that fire out. So what does the Quran say in chapter 41, Surah Fussilat? Verse 34, Allah gives us the antidote. He says, a'udhu-billahi minash-shaytanir-rajim. وَلَا تَسْتَوِي الْحَسَنَةُ وَلَا السَّيِّئَةُ ادْفَعْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ فَإِذَا الَّذِي بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَهُ عَدَاوَةٌ كَأَنَّهُ وَلِيٌّ حَمِيمٌ. Goodness and evil can never be equal. Repel evil with what is better or best. Then see, the one between whom you and them was enmity has become a close friend. God shows us, brothers and sisters, that you cannot fight fire with fire. Eye for an eye will leave everybody blind. When people are bad to you, respond with goodness. It's hard. It's a station to get to in Islam. Controlling the emotions. But God shows us when you fight fire with water, that person who is your enemy today, tomorrow will become possibly will become a close friend. As I conclude on this blessed day of Ramadan, let me leave us with 3 points and tips as we finish off the day. Point 1 is that one of the first steps to calling towards God and all that is good is to start by calming tension between factions and repelling the evil of others by showing them goodness. We cannot fight fire with fire. We must fight fire with water. Point number 2, do not think that the passage of time will quell the anger or hatred. Grudges are not easily forgotten. We need to actively work at calming the tension and resolving the situation before it gets out of hand. Point number 3, and we conclude, is that in dealing with one's adversaries, simply having good morals is not enough. We must be aggressive in our good morals and repel the best that we can ever be. Never let animosity get the best of you. God willing, we will continue and conclude tomorrow on day 30 of Ramadan Reflections. Until then, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.